a lot of people, like a lot of kids, I didn't know what my dad did, or I vaguely knew that he wrote stories, but I didn't think about it. I was probably, I was 15 the first time I read anything of his, and it was his first book and his only novel, The Lieutenant, and I really loved it. And I couldn't believe my father wrote something that good because, you know, he's just that guy. And then the first short story of his I read, I was probably 18, and it was the story Killings, which was ultimately adapted into the film In the Bedroom. And I couldn't believe the power of that story. And so, yeah, I loved his work. I still love his work. He's one of my favorite writers. I think he's a really honest, passionate, compassionate writer. The Catholicism is always, that's foreign to me. I don't practice a particular faith, and that's all. But I love his work. I think he was an artist. Yeah, Vonnegut actually, when my father left the Marines, moved to, he went to the Iowa Writers Workshop in the 60s. Some of my earliest memories were our grandmother bought us a TV, and this guy, Kurt, would come down every day at 3 o'clock and watch Batman. And he'd chain smoke and had curly hair, and he'd look down at me, and I'd look up at him, and he'd say, "I like the Riddler. Who's your favorite character?" You smoke. And I said, "Oh, I like Falseface." "Yeah, Kapow Kazowie." And it was Kurt Vonnegut. Had no idea. Years later, "I watched Batman with Kurt Vonnegut?" "Yes, you did." I wouldn't say, well, I would say my father's life was tumultuous in that he was what sociologists would call a serial monogamist. He was married 3 times, divorced 3 times, and I think if he'd lived, he'd been married again. He and I talked about some of this later in his life, and I know that with each marriage, he meant to stay married. It just wasn't in the cards for him. So the tumultuous part was really just the home front, the nest. It was never quite stable. Do I see any of his writing in mind? Not really. Well, only in that we both, he wrote really deep, lovely, character-driven fiction. I try to write character-driven fiction. But I think we have such a different vision of the world, and I think his sentences were actually more lyrical and beautiful. He was a real stylist. And he was from the South. That's an important distinction. He was a Southern writer, at least in voice, I think, and in cadence. He had a lot of Faulkner and St. James Bible in him, I think. And I'm from New England. It's a whole different vibe. No, I don't think so. I think if we didn't have the same name, no one would ever think of us two together. But I might be wrong. I'm just, the writer of one of these things, so I might be wrong about that. I read a lot of Southern fiction, and I think what I love about it is what I love about all my relatives from Louisiana. My mother and father, every grandparent, aunt, uncle, cousin, everybody's from Louisiana and Texas too. So I feel sort of a soulful connection to that region, although I'm an East Coast kid. I'm a Milltown kid from north of Boston. I think that there's a certain lyricism in Southern writing that is not in Northern writing. I'm making broad generalizations here, but there's a certain lyrical quality that I think might come from the St. James Bible in some ways. It comes from, I don't know, it's frankly a mystery. But I love, and there's also a deep sensual quality to a lot of, in so much Southern writing, everybody's got a body. There's bourbon and crawfish and hot sun on your face and the squeal of a car over gravel. I'm a sucker for all that. I love that. And I'm making broad generalizations, but one could argue that a lot of writing from the North tends to be a little more cerebral and urban, fast-clipped, more of interior sort of life, a little edgier. And I like both. I mean, both are delicious, really. And I don't know, man. I haven't really thought about this with me. I may kind of fall somewhere in between. I don't know. I think they're equally powerful. I don't believe Southern fiction is superior to Northern fiction at all. And I'm not even comfortable with these broad generalizations because there are so many exceptions. But there are some broad truths there, I think.